South Asia Committee of the International Law Section presents the Global Lawyers Summit in association with CNBC TV 18.
The Global Lawyers Summit, organized by the South Asia Committee of the International Law Section in partnership with CNBC TV 18, brought together industry leaders, experts, and professionals to explore a diverse array of legal topics. One of the key highlights of the Global Lawyers Summit was the session titled Growing with Climate Change, Energy Transition, where legal experts engaged in a critical conversation on the legal intricacies of the energy sector amidst the global climate challenge. Mr. Jayant Sinha, Member of Parliament and former Minister of State for Finance and Civil Aviation, opened the session with his special address, helping set the context for an invigorating discussion.
Remember that when greenhouse gases go into the atmosphere, they act like a blanket around the earth. And because they're acting like a blanket around the earth, they're heating the planet up. And so one of the things that atmospheric scientists, climate scientists, and people like me who study climate change focus on is what is happening to carbon particles. Carbon particles in the atmosphere, and as you can see, we've crossed 422 parts per million, 21 parts per million. And this is unprecedented. This has not happened in the last 250,000 years. So as far as climate change is concerned, we are in unprecedented territory. Humanity has never seen this level of carbon in the atmosphere.
The footprint of climate change comes from the time you get to sleep to the time you wake up, every walk of life. We don't seem to be conscious about it adequately. We are not doing enough. And that truly brings me to the first speaker. Anita has been an investment banker, worked with the IFC for long years, worked with CDPQ, invested significantly, pension funds from Canada coming into India and investing in renewables on highways, and now leads her own investment structure. So without more, may I invite you to share your thoughts?
The big pride and joy for me is the fact that in India's renewable energy sector today, every single Canadian pension fund has a stake. Other sovereigns like ADIA, GIC, Temasek have considerable stake, and that's great. So we've enabled these large institutional investors to come in. It's not a picnic. They have faced problems, and all the lawyers in this room will know that it's not an easy sector. But having said that, once they've come in, and they come in usually into brownfield assets, and then once they get the confidence, then they can invest through those platforms into greenfield.
As Mr. Sinha was telling us just before we came in, the 2070 trajectory is driven by the fact that all coal must stop by 2045. Now, that's a hell of a challenge to bear with. So, Gurdeep, over to you.
So, the company like ours, which was primarily set up as National Thermal Power Corporation, we realized that climate change is inevitable. Transition will be there. The only question is, what is the speed at which it is sustainable? And when we are talking, and thanks Amit Jain for adding that, we have the responsibility that energy security is paramount. We cannot really compromise on the energy security. And along with that, how we can expedite, how fast we can move on the energy transition.
Next, I invite Saurabh Kumar. Saurabh, over to you.
The key differential, which almost everybody has highlighted, and let me articulate this, we will be developing using non-fossil fuel sources primarily. I mean, that's the hope. And that is the unique proposition. Is it a challenge? Is it an opportunity? I see this as a huge, huge opportunity where you will need very different business models. You will need very different regulations. Some of it has already witnessed, and you mentioned about the electric bus program that the country has rolled out. Very unique in itself. I don't think a program of this scale and magnitude exists anywhere in the world. And we are already attracting attention of other developing countries who want to emulate this in this whole thing.
Over to you, Shalabh. What is required to get the private capital in? Will wishful thinking be good enough? Or can we do more?
As India or other countries are moving towards transition finance, a lot of opportunities will come up. Development of carbon credit markets, interoperability between taxonomies that are developed in India and those that are operating in EU, in US, the IRA Act and all that. When people talk of climate risk, I have heard it's physical risk and transition risk. Let me add a third one. It's also litigation risk. As you see companies, let's say steel, exporting to EU and all, you will find pressures even on the legal and litigation side, which is an opportunity for you guys. Therefore, you need to get deep into that. Transition finance is critical. The business as usual sectors will attract the finance, but how do you get it for a steel? How do you get it for a cement? For things like electric arc furnace, for things like hydrogen, blue hydrogen, for waste heat recovery, for blending biofuels into the main fuel, for having some transition fuels. How to accelerate that?
So I will end by just quoting a dialogue from Mary Poppins rather than a jurist. She said, when the world turns upside down, the best thing is to turn right around with it. Time's come for that. Thank you.
The summit witnessed an array of many more insightful sessions, one of which was titled Driving India's Growth Through Investments, Importance of Investor-Friendly Regulations, which started with a special address by Ms. Nivruti Rai, MD and CEO of Invest India.
In investment, my goal was don't just bring investment, ensure return of investment. That's where my strength and my team's collective strength comes to play. We can work with government on policies, regulations, and legal experts. We can work on dollars with incentives, sovereign money, global sovereign money, or private money. Lastly, if there is any partnership, we have 100,000 plus registered startups within DPIT. We have access to that. Is there any R&D partnership? So that is the return of investment. In trade, which is also our charter, we said we care about exports. We care about converting imports to exports, but I also care about imports. Why? Because I am in a discussion with the business, making sure it's a win-win. I want to come up with strategic imports that India does not want to work on. There are strengths elsewhere. Lastly, R&D came naturally to me because of my background, but the way I think is trade enhancement will give me money today. It's you sell something, you get the money back. Investment is something that will get money tomorrow, and R&D is something which will get me money day after tomorrow.
I start with Gaurav. What do you think in the last 20 years? What are the key factors which have led to India being such an investment destination?
You know, from an investment perspective, what's important is how easy is it for me to bring money into a particular country? Will my money grow? What is the return that I can get vis-a-vis opportunity cost there? And the final one is, after that, what returns can I get? How easy is it for me to take money back? So in the last 20 years, which is a big horizon, I mean, a lot has happened. And, talking to the legal fraternity here, it's almost very humbling because you've been at the forefront of designing many of the regulations in terms of bringing that money in. And there have been a lot of other structural changes as well.
Nivedita, you've been involved with US-based investors for a long time. From a US perspective, I think it would be interesting to get your thoughts on what is the dialogue currently.
India has been able to position itself in a way where we have a number of different partners. The alignments have changed, and we're able to not only benefit from the US-India partnership, but if you look at, for example, the India-Europe corridor that we're talking about, Middle East corridor, we're talking about the Quad, which is India, Australia, Japan, and the US. So a number of these other frameworks are actually lending themselves to finding ways to partner and to engage in the Indian market.
Vinita, you are also in a unique position where you're sort of leading the legal function across offices in Asia. I think India is perhaps in some ways differentiated from those markets. So what are the points of difference? And what makes India stand out as an investment destination?
I see climate transition, right? If India, the aspirations that India has in terms of becoming a high-income country, that should happen or will happen as a climate, resistant economy. The other thing that I see is the quality of the jobs that will get created, given every year the number of labor force that is going to join the Indian market.
Prateek, I think the topic for you, what is it that we need to think about in terms of potential areas to, what is it that would hold an international investor back when thinking about India at this point of time?
When we are thinking about an investment or when we've made such investment, the regulatory climate does not shift. There is no uncertainty given we would invest for a specific period of time. While we are long-term investors, it would typically be 8, 10, 12 years. But there needs to be some amount of certainty for our exit and the regulatory environment not changing by the time we are looking to exit. I think that's one of the key things that any foreign sponsor, any foreign investor would look at.
Coming to you, Anand, when you work on an investment transaction for a client, and the client is looking at India for the first time, then what would be the issues that would be most bothersome for that client?
When you look at other countries, everything's permitted. In fact, there would just be a small list, maybe one page or a few bullets where they would outline, if these are the sectors, you need to be speaking to the government first, but the rest, just go ahead and do it. India, it's a bit more, it's different. It's like it needs to be permitted and it needs to not be permitted, but one of the two needs to feature, as opposed to just having a full-fledged negative list.
South Asia Committee of the International Law Section presents the Global Lawyers Summit in association with CNBC TV 18.
The South Asia Committee of the International Law Section hosted the Global Lawyers Summit in partnership with CNBC TV 18, providing a platform for dialogue and cross-pollination of ideas along unrivaled networking opportunities for delegates and speakers attending the two-day summit. A pivotal session titled Law and Philanthropy by Honorable Justice A.K. Sikri and Mr. Bhuvan Ribhu, founder, Child Marriage Free India, highlighted the intersection between legal prowess and philanthropic ambition.
Noble profession means that it is, in this profession, lawyers, including judges, they are meant to serve the society in different ways. And that is where the philanthropy comes. If I may quote John D. Rockefeller, and he had said, philanthropy is the effort to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by the generous donations of money to good causes. So this is what it is, to promote the welfare, including in the form of money, donation of money. And the legal profession or the legal system is supposed to do both. As I was saying, that the legal profession is treated as a noble profession. And if you see that traditionally the gowns which lawyers used to wear, and in India we still wear, it may not be now prevalent in many countries, but then these advocates' robes has its own historical development, if we may say. So these garments, rich in tradition, transcend not only mere aesthetic concerns, they embody a tangible pledge to the value of justice, fairness, and professional integrity. Beyond their role in maintaining decorum, these garments signify the wearer's commitment to carrying the weight of societal expectations and the trust of those they represent.
Law plus philanthropy, I think, are not isolated terms. Law plus philanthropy is justice. When we are talking of philanthropy, we are talking about doing something for the other person. And law itself is the means towards the larger end of justice. About half an hour ago, I was listening to Honorable Mr. Justice Sikri. About 15 years ago, in 2009, in Delhi, about 30 young children had been rescued who had been sold into slavery to work in our homes through a placement agency. They had all been sexually abused. Many of them had been trafficked under the pretense of under the pretext of marriage, with the lure that you will be married off as a 13-year-old, as a 15-year-old, and you will be given a skill as well to continue with your life. When these children were rescued, they had not been fed for weeks on end. The case went to the Delhi High Court, and eventually trafficking was defined by none other than Justice Sikri.
Focusing on the future roadmap to elevate India's standing on the global stage, the summit hosted an insightful session titled Pathway to Viksit Bharat, focusing on visionary ideas to help meet the government's ambitious vision for transforming India into a developed nation.
So Amitabh, I'd like to get your thoughts in terms of, how do you see India today in terms of global perceptions, and how do we stack up just now in terms of the broad, if you zoom out and look at India from outer space in a manner of speaking, how would we look just now?
So Cyril, first of all, it's important that we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We are poised to be the 3rd largest economy, surpassing Japan and Germany by 2027 end. The general perception outside is that India has carried out structural reforms in its economy, that it has rapidly digitized its economy. Thirdly, that it's done a vast amount of infrastructure work as far as its housing, water supply, toilets, building roads is concerned. And also that it is now emerging as a leader in climate action. The fact that we've done about 187 gigawatt of renewables, that we are pushing for green hydrogen in hard-to-abate sectors, demonstrates that we've done very well. Also the fact that during G20, India demonstrated great leadership, and the Prime Minister, under his leadership, could steer G20 in a manner that we were able to bring G7 emerging markets, Russia, China, all together, not merely on all developmental issues of growth and progress, but also on issues of reforms of multilateral institutions, digital public infrastructure, women-led development, and also on the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where even the United Nations had not been able to build a consensus. India was able to straddle all these worlds together and build consensus. But I really think that the challenge now is to accelerate the pace of our growth, because I'm a great believer that your external perception, your national power is a function of your economic growth. And India's got the capacity and capability of growing at much higher rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, year after year. And we need to do it over a 3-decade period, because it's not merely that we need to be the 3rd largest economy, but we need to raise the per capita income of Indians across.
You recently said, Uday, that you called it a kind of Goldilocks moment. What do you think we should expect in the next few years? And I'm being a little mischievous here and saying that if we're headed towards a Modi 3.0, what should we expect in terms of economic reforms from the next term of government?
So I think, Cyril, first of all, I want to take this opportunity about actually speaking about leadership and how India has transformed and is ready to take on a more important leadership role. No better example than the G20 and how India conducted itself. And I will strongly join in, on behalf of all of us, for outstanding role of Amitabh in demonstrating India's leadership and tenacity to a very successful G20. And it is a signal of what it's about, how ready and how open are we to dream to be taking a bolder position, which enables us to at least try and get there. And again, taking on from what Amitabh said, just looking at some numbers. And since it's the American Bar Association, I will talk in US dollars for a moment. If India grew at 9% dollar, if I'm not talking real, 9% dollar, from now to 2047, India will be a 30 trillion economy. If India grew at 9% real, we will be between 36 and 40 trillion dollar economy. Therefore, even if we looked at a modest 9% dollar, which is real India, assuming India's nominal goes to 11, real goes to 7.5, India gets into a 30+ trillion economy. Therefore, we must set our sights higher. Therefore, if I had to pick a number, I would say 35 trillion plus is what we should go for. However, it reminds me of the fact that we have to play a long-term game. This has to be a 20-25-year game and not a hit and run. And how do we, when we look at the future next 5 years, what are we going to do as policymakers and practitioners, continuing from all the good work which may have been done till now, to really put the pegs of some of the harder and the more difficult stuff which we need to do to take us to a 35 trillion economy in the next 25 years.
South Asia Committee of the International Law Section presents the Global Lawyers Summit in association with CNBC TV 18.